1. Saiyans descend on Fenris. The wind bit like a knife across Fenris. White stretched to the horizon, ice and snow as far as the eye could see, and death was part of the landscape. A year on Fenris lasted the equivalent of 40 months on Holy Terra. Only for a few brief months would the planet drift nearer its sun and grant the whole world a rare, brittle summer. A ship screamed from the sky, trailing a long plume of exhaust. It struck the glacier with a thunderous impact, gouging an elliptical crater in the ice. When the smoke cleared, an eye-shaped craft sat embedded in the snow, a single-occupant shuttle with a red hatch. Inside, a human boy of about 5, with an unusual hairstyle and a tail, slept on. 20-odd years before, a similar ship had come down on Fenris and brought the boy who would become the Wolf King. Found and raised by a she-wolf, he grew with 2 wolf brothers until fate brought him among humans and into his adoptive father's care. He took the name Leman Russ and became ruler of this frozen world. Warriors from a nearby tribe discovered the new ship and wasted no time. They ran to report it to their king. When Leman Russ heard that a child had arrived the same way he had, a fierce kinship stirred in him. He ordered his personal guard to recover the boy and the craft and bring them to his hall. Inside the hatch, amid the clamor, the small-tailed boy woke. He blinked, disoriented. "What the? Where is this? Did I drift off course?" Axis took in his surroundings quickly. Around him stood men who were little more than barbarians, crude iron blades and sharpened wooden stakes, heavy furs that stank even through the shuttle. This place was primitive, no Earth. He hoped Frieza's legion wouldn't trace him here. Logically, Frieza hadn't sent anyone after Kakarot's ship. They wouldn't be pursuing a 5-year-old Saiyan. He had transmigrated into this body and barely escaped Vegeta's doom. He could do without more complications. Let him stay hidden for 10 years and become a Super Saiyan, he thought. Heavy footsteps announced someone approaching. Thump, thump, thump. The ground seemed to tremble as an enormous figure filled Axis's sight. Roughly 12 feet tall, his face looked carved from stone, 2 great canine teeth jutting from his mouth, and long, tangled hair streaming down his back. 2 massive wolves padded at his heels. Danger rippled through Axis. He snapped on the scouter over his eye. Beep, beep, beep. The numbers flickered and locked. 1666. 1666. Axis hadn't expected that. This hulking savage had a power level of 1666. On this remote world, he was a king, a monstrous threat. Axis's own reading was only 110, a low-class Saiyan warrior. If the giant had hostile intent, Axis couldn't fight back. Even transforming into a great ape, 10-fold strength would probably not be enough. He decided to play helpless and see if sympathy would buy him time. He was 5 after all. Playing a child came naturally. The tall man put his bare hands on the shuttle and forced the hatch open. Such raw strength, prying off a ship's hatch with nothing but his arms, made Axis's mind race. That required power the scouter pegged much higher than most mortals. The giant seemed to do it effortlessly. He spoke in a language Axis couldn't parse. Axis tried the universal tongue, but the man looked puzzled. Then the giant, Leman Russ, lifted Axis out with both hands and held him high for the tribe to see. He patted his own chest and spoke again. The warriors raised their weapons and shouted words Axis didn't yet understand. Once he picked up enough of the Fenris tongue, Axis understood the meaning behind Leman Russ's gesture. "I saved him. From now on, this child is my little wolf cub." Held by someone more than 1,500 points stronger, Axis froze and forced a wide, innocent smile. He felt cold wind slice into his bones. This place was brutally cold. Around Leman Russ stood burly men, 2 meters tall and powerfully built, but compared to him, they were puny. Their readings were only in the tens. If not for Leman Russ, Axis thought he could probably deal with all of them on his own. This giant was something else, a high combat aberration, perhaps, like the legendary Super Saiyan or Frieza's own kin. His ship lay broken in the crater. Inside were several Saiyan combat suits, a few Saibaman pods he had swiped when fleeing Vegeta, and several power-level scouters. That was all. He had no idea if anyone on this savage planet could repair it. He hoped the tribesmen wouldn't loot his gear. Leman Russ waved the men aside and led Axis to a long table heaped with food. The giant smiled and made an eating gesture, encouraging the boy to sit. Axis stared down at the spread. Roasted meats, smoked sausages, hard breads, cheeses, thick stews, food he hadn't tasted in days. When you invite a Saiyan to eat, he decided, you better be prepared. Axis attacked the table with the appetite of a warrior. He grabbed a hunk of roasted meat and swallowed it in great eager bites, then reached for more. Plate after plate vanished as he devoured everything in reach. Leman Russ watched him with growing pleasure. The sight of a child who could eat so much pleased the king. He himself had been a ravenous eater at that age, curled beside his wolf mother with his brothers. This boy's body was solid, his arms and legs small but packed with force. Russ wondered if the boy might be kin, a lost brother, some distant relative, anything to explain the tale and the strength. The gathered tribesmen laughed and cheered. "Look, my little wolf cub can eat," Russ boomed, proud. "A child who eats like this will become a great warrior. Great Wolf King, perhaps one day he will be as mighty as you." "Congratulations, Great Wolf King." Their laughter faded as they realized how much he had consumed. In mere minutes, Axis had eaten the equivalent of 2 or 3 adult meals and showed no sign of slowing. "Lord Russ," someone stammered, he eats even more than you did as a child." Russ only laughed louder. "Then this one must be starving. Bring more food. Let him eat his fill." As ruler of Fenris, Leman Russ was not afraid his larder would be emptied by a hungry child. He had seen worse omens, and perhaps, he thought, the arrival of this long-tailed boy was a good one indeed. 2. The Wolf King wants to compete with the Saiyans in eating sing. After Axis devoured more servings than anyone could count, the tribal soldiers finally went pale. "King, he eats so much. Won't that be a problem?" they stammered. "Where did all that food go in such a small body? What sort of stomach did this child have?" Leman Russ just laughed and waved them off. "It's all right. Being able to eat is a good thing. Good appetite." He grinned fondly. "What a fine little one. He eats even more than I did at his age." The long-tailed child grew more endearing to Russ the more he watched him. Axis wiped his mouth, having finished over 20 helpings under the stunned eyes of the Fenris warriors. He had only just arrived on this world and had deliberately held back. He'd stopped when he felt about half full. The warriors stared at him in disbelief. This kid's appetite rivaled the Wolf King's. Was this some joke? Could he really be the king's illegitimate son from the sky? Both of them had come from nowhere, and the sight of the small, ravenous newcomer unnerved them. Axis gave the tall man a satisfied post-meal smile. Hopefully he hadn't frightened them. Those wide, blanched faces suggested they'd never heard of the Saiyans. Good. His race were notorious warmongers across the stars. Better that these people remained ignorant. He did worry about moons and satellites. If a large moon ever rose at night, he might inadvertently transform into a great ape. Low-class Saiyans couldn't always control that transformation. If he lost his wits, he could cause terrible trouble. "Ha! My little wolf cub, are you full?" Leman Russ asked gently as he approached. Axis nodded and patted his stomach, which showed no sign of change. "I'm not full," he thought. "I could eat so much more, but I'll stop to avoid scaring him." "Prepare a clean room for this child," the king commanded. "Bring out the best furs, light the stove, make sure he sleeps well, and move his ship into my chamber, put it beside mine." Satisfied, he looked at Axis with the pride of a man who had found something precious. Over the next months, Wolf King Russ carried the boy, pointing out things across Fenris and teaching him words. Wolf, cold, food, warrior, the first 4 every Fenris child must learn. Russ noticed many similarities between Axis and himself. Appetite, fighting ability, even the way each had fallen from the sky. Axis's mind, however, didn't seem as quick. Russ had learned the human tongue in days. Axis took months to grasp it, and only spoke haltingly at first. Still, his intelligence was far above that of an ordinary child, and Russ believed he'd improve with age. Axis's daily life settled into a simple rhythm. Eat, learn the Fenris language, sleep. Over the year, his strength steadily climbed. His combat power rose by 50 points to reach 160, typical growth for a Saiyan, so he avoided intense training and stuck to regular activities. By the end of that year, he had mastered the local language and learned the man who had adopted him was Leman Russ, king of this frozen world, called the Wolf King. The people here knew nothing of the galactic Emperor Frieza, his evil legion, or the broader tales of the Saiyans. Fenris lay on the edge of the galaxy, poor and neglected, no one considered it worth conquering, but its harsh environment suited Axis's growth, and he planned to stay until he was older. One day, Russ returned from the hunt with a boast. "My little wolf cub, I brought down an enormous mammoth. Want to see who can eat more?" "Are you sure?" Axis rolled his eyes. "When have you ever beaten me?" To challenge a Scion at eating was bravado. Even Frieza would think twice. "This time I starved myself for 3 days," Russ said with a grin. "If I win, you'll call me father." Axis sighed inwardly. Does he have a habit of adopting sons? He thought. He wouldn't mind calling Russ his master, but little wolf cub and this father business irritated him. Still, on Fenris there was a tradition. When two people disputed and one wanted the other to submit, they could settle it with 3 possible contests: eating, drinking, or wrestling. Win one, and the loser obeyed. Facing a small child, Russ could not bring himself to choose drinking or wrestling, so he picked eating. The result was inevitable. Once Axis had fully learned the language, the two would hold these eating contests every few days, and Russ never won a single one. Losing to a child in an eating match rankled the Wolf King. "Humph, you brat. I've already had the meat roasted. This time I'll make you call me father," Russ declared. "Then let's go," Axis clapped. "If you want to get beaten, I'll oblige." Soon the mammoth had been turned into roasted meat and set before them. The rank-and-file warriors watched with a mixture of horror and awe as king and child prepared to do what Fenris folk called settling a dispute the old way, with food. Chapter 3. Scion Sparring Partner, Wolf King Leman Russ. The mammoth, more than 10 meters long and nearly 7 meters tall, would have fed a whole tribe for days. For a Scion, though, it was nothing more than a hearty snack. Tribal warriors closed in around the two figures, forming a rough circle and letting out excited roars. Axis waved in greeting to the clan. "I think the great Wolf King will win this time," one hunter guessed. "No way. Don't underestimate Axis. I've never seen a child like him. He's terrifying when he eats," another replied. Those who had watched Axis devour a meal knew exactly how fierce he could be. Soon Axis and Leman Russ stood before the enormous roasted mammoth, its skin gleaming with oil and its meat a perfect golden brown. The smell alone set Axis's appetite racing. This world was full of gigantic beasts. Scions who lived here never had to worry about food. "Want to make a bet?" Axis asked, eyes flicking to Leman Russ. "A bet?" Leman Russ raised an amused eyebrow. "You always say I have to call you father when you win," Axis said, narrowing his eyes. "But when I win, I get nothing. That's not fair. From now on, anyone who wants to challenge me has to put something up, or I won't accept." Leman Russ chuckled. "You're sharp, little wolf cub. What do you want as your stake?" "How about this? I'm getting used to this planet. Starting tomorrow, you become my sparring partner." Axis smiled. If a Scion had a dedicated partner, his power could improve faster. At 6 years old, his bones were stable enough for real training, and Leman Russ was strong, the perfect candidate. In 1 year, Axis had already gained 50 points of combat power, and Leman Russ himself had risen past 1,700, a high-ranking mutant already. "No problem," Leman Russ agreed with a grin. He was curious to see how strong the boy had become, maybe even how he compared to Leman Russ in his youth. A warrior barked, "Ready, start," and the two lunged for the meat. Leman Russ attacked the roasted feast with the earnest hunger of a man who'd gone 3 days without proper food. He stuffed meat into his mouth, chewing and swallowing with furious determination. He wanted to show the child that he still had the edge. Around him, the tribe watched with growing astonishment. "What? How is this possible? Is that kid even human?" Axis didn't sit politely to eat. He leapt onto the carcass, opened his mouth, and began consuming with impossible speed. It was as if he were swallowing air, only denser. In an instant, he had devoured an entire mammoth leg and showed no sign of slowing. "Damn kid," Leman Russ muttered, redoubling his efforts. He swallowed half-chewed mouthfuls without pausing, which shoving food down as fast as he could. An hour later, Axis leaned back, patting a round belly as he sat contentedly inside the mammoth's enormous ribcage. Leman Russ had eaten a leg and a basinful of meat. What remained had been taken by Axis. The king's meal had left him only about 70% full, an odd, humiliating sensation for a warrior used to his own appetite. Axis strolled over, grinning. "Looks like I won." "You brat, just you wait." Leman Russ growled, spitting up a wad of excess and taking deep breaths. I'll beat you tomorrow. Still, promise made, I'll be your sparring partner. Axis smiled triumphantly. Good. Rest up. You look terrible. Can barely walk straight, he teased. Leman Russ went to bed furious but determined. The next morning, he took Axis out to a chosen training ground, a wide, stark ice plain. How do we train? Axis asked as he stretched, bouncing lightly on his toes. You said you wanted to spar, Leman Russ replied. Sparring is the best way. Show me what you've got. He tossed his cloak aside and gestured. Axis didn't hold back. He tightened his muscles, eyes sharpening to a blade-like focus, and sprang forward like a young predator. His body crouched slightly, coiled as a drawn bow, then exploded forward. The ice beneath him spiderwebbed with cracks as his feet drove off, and he streaked toward Leman Russ with a whistling rush. Take this! Axis snarled and snapped his right leg out like a whip aimed at Leman Russ's face. The kick tore the air. The force in it made the world hush for a heartbeat. Leman Russ remained calm. He raised his left hand like a slab of iron and met the attack. Fist and foot collided with a visible shockwave. Ice fractured outward and glittering shards peppered the air, a cold pressure rolling across the plain. Axis used the rebound to spring back, flipping through the air and bringing down a thunderous hammer kick toward Leman Russ's head. Still, Leman Russ met it with one hand, palm fixing the strike as if closing a trap. He didn't move. Axis's blow struck something immovable, and the force flattened against it with no result. Good speed, Leman Russ said with a faint smile. But you lack enough power. A spark of defiance lit Axis's eyes. He landed and launched into a flurry of punches that came like a storm. Each blow carried a fierce snap, wind whistling between the strikes as if the air itself were being shredded. Leman Russ countered with the same steady palm, his hand a blur that redirected every hit. Each contact produced dull thuds and visible ripples in the air. The ice took more damage, lines and chips spreading with every exchange. Axis's assault built to a crescendo. His final sweeping kick gouged deeply into the brittle surface, scattering chunks of ice. Leman Russ didn't bother to block. He simply stepped aside and waited, unwavering as a mountain. The distance between them, in experience and raw composure, was clear. Not bad, kid. That's a powerful kick, Leman Russ admitted with a hint of respect in his voice. Axis panted, sweat beading on his brow, fingers tingling from the impact of his strikes. But the fire in his chest burned brighter. The Saiyan's combat cells were stirring. He was loving every second of it. Again! Axis roared and surged forward so fast he left an afterimage on the ice. Wind howled around him. Fragments of ice and snow swirled into a frosty gale. The battle had only just begun. Chapter 4. The Wolf King encounters Ki for the first time. What is this power? Axis's breath quickened, but his eyes burned even hotter, alight with fighting spirit. His Saiyan blood boiled. Every strike carried a wild force, as if he wanted to tear his opponent apart. Still, Leman Russ remained unnervingly calm. His movements looked casual, yet he met each of Axis's attacks with perfect blocks, as if he were invulnerable. Your attacks are too straightforward, lacking variety, Leman Russ said, easily stopping Axis's fist. His voice was calm but carried an undeniable authority. Axis ground his teeth, stepped back, crouched slightly, clenched his fists, and launched himself up. He spun in the air, legs whirling like a cyclone aimed at Leman Russ's head and chest. Cyclone kick! He roared, pouring his assault down like a storm. A flicker of approval crossed Leman Russ's face, but he didn't move his feet. His hands were like phantoms, catching every kick with precise timing. Each impact sounded as a muffled thud. The ice below them cracked and splintered, shards scattering. Not bad. This is getting interesting, Leman Russ said with a slight smile, then suddenly slapped Axis's chest. Axis's pupils constricted. He crossed his arms to block, but the slap still sent him sliding across the ice, skidding dozens of meters before he jabbed a foot under him and stopped. His arms tingled and his chest ached, but he grinned. He'd underestimated his adoptive father. This man's combat awareness and experience were terrifying. Again, Axis shouted, charging. This time his attacks were smarter, quicker, more varied. He used feints and setups instead of headlong assaults. He feinted a straight punch to the chest and, at the last moment, swept a leg toward the ankle. Surprise flashed in Leman Russ's eyes, but he easily avoided the sweep, tracing a graceful arc through the air before landing steadily. "Ha, my little wolf cub is improving, but it's still not enough," he chuckled, then struck with a chopping hand to Axis's shoulder. Pain shot through Axis's shoulder. He staggered back, breath ragged. "Combat isn't just a contest of strength," Leman Russ said slowly. "It's a test of skill and wit. You can't be careless." He began to instruct. "Your strength is more than enough, but your style is too one-dimensional. You need variety and strategy. Learn to watch your opponent. Don't just attack." For his age, Axis crushed his peers, but in combat cunning, he still lagged behind Leman Russ. When Leman Russ had been Axis's size, he might not have possessed raw power like this boy, but he could copy a foe's patterns from a single look, then optimize them, foresee the next moves, sometimes a dozen steps ahead, and execute perfectly. In the short spar they'd had, Leman Russ had already mapped Axis's entire repertoire. He could predict every strike the boy would attempt. Axis swallowed and nodded. Leman Russ was right. He had much to learn. He adjusted his breathing and resumed his stance. They traded blows again. The ice plane rang with the impact of fists and feet and the crack of splitting ice. Axis varied rhythm and technique. Sudden lunges, deceptive pauses, baited openings. Leman Russ countered with the same steady precision, each reply both corrective and instructive, nudging Axis to push past his limits. Snow and ice spun in their wake as the two moved like lightning across the frozen field. After a few more exchanges, Leman Russ knocked Axis down once more. "I pretty much know your level now. Let's stop for today." He stretched his wrists. In only a few dozen minutes, he'd gauged the boy's capabilities. No one in the tribe, except himself, could match Axis. This kid must have come from the same place as he did, otherwise he couldn't be this strong. "Don't get cocky. I haven't even used my full power," Axis growled, eyes blazing. A white light flared from his body. On the planet where Axis had landed as a low-level Saiyan warrior, he'd practiced this technique again and again against the natives. It was a classic he'd picked up in that strange, distant world. He dropped into the pose, hands cupped before him, palms facing, fingertips curved, the starting position for a Kamehameha. His feet dug into the ice, which screeched under the pressure. Energy swirled around him like burning air, condensing into a blinding ball between his palms. "Kamehameha! Wave!" Axis shouted, confidence roaring through his voice. The beam erupted, a searing column of light launched directly at Leman Russ. Where it passed, ice vaporized. The air itself seemed to tear. Leman Russ's pupils narrowed. He'd never seen this sort of attack. The energy made his skin prickle with warning, but he didn't panic. He backpedaled, his feet carving furrows through the ice, and crossed his arms to try to take the strike with his physique alone. The beam slammed into his forearms with an earth-shaking boom. The ice beneath him shattered, the impact threw his body back dozens of meters. Snow and shards flew in an icy storm. When he finally came to a stop, Leman Russ looked down, a trace of charred skin smoking along his arms. "What is this power?" he murmured, disbelief flickering across his face. He'd fought the planet's most terrifying creatures and never taken a wound like this. That a child had injured him, left him shaken. Axis panted, sweat beading on his forehead. His arms trembled. The Kamehameha had drained a vast amount of his stamina. He'd spent all his ki in that single blast. "This is the power of ki," Axis said, a proud grin twisting his exhaustion into arrogance. Leman Russ, a mutant of the tribe with enormous physical might, had never used such an energy. For Axis, who could push his power into the hundreds when he tapped his ki, the fact that his adoptive father had completely withstood the hit, even while being scorched, proved how ridiculously tough the man's body was. Leman Russ slowly lowered his hands, his expression complicated. He had never heard the word ki, but the force of Axis's attack made him take it seriously. If Axis had been a little stronger, he might have been badly hurt, or worse. He took a breath, settled his breathing, and looked up at Axis. "Little wolf cub," Leman Russ said, voice steadier now, "I will teach you to truly control your power. But first, tell me exactly what this ki is." Leman Russ's curiosity about the mysterious energy had become keen. Axis wiped his brow and straightened, chest heaving but eyes bright. "No problem. I'll teach you. Everyone has ki inside them," Axis answered. Chapter 5. Unable to learn ki? The power belongs to only one person. Axis and Leman Russ sat cross-legged on a wind-scoured, snow-capped peak, breathing slowly. Their hands rested on their knees, eyes closed. Axis was trying to teach Leman Russ to sense the ki inside his body. Ki is the most basic energy in every living thing, Axis said slowly. It's in every cell. With practice, you can feel it and learn to control it. Try to sense it carefully. You should be able to notice it. Axis had trained hard and had proven himself in combat. With a little guidance from him, Leman Russ should have been able to pick up the basics easily. What exactly should I do? Leman Russ asked, nodding. You need to calm your mind, feel the flow inside you, find the source of that energy, and then try to make it circulate, Axis explained. Leman Russ frowned and concentrated, closing his eyes to search for any inner change. He tried as earnestly as he could, but nothing came. No warmth, no vibration, no current. There was simply nothing like the ki Axis described. He tried again, disbelieving. Still nothing. My little wolf cub, Leman Russ said, opening his eyes. I can't feel what you're talking about. Your ki is as intangible to me as air. I don't sense any of it. Axis opened his eyes and looked at him, a little helpless. This made no sense. In their earlier combat, Axis had seen that Leman Russ was a natural fighting genius. Every technique resolved with uncanny precision. That kind of instinct couldn't be explained by experience alone. On this planet, there was no one else who could even spar with him. A warrior like Leman Russ should be able to learn ki without much trouble, especially with Axis as teacher. Vegeta, in the legends Axis remembered, had managed to grasp Kai after a single battle on Earth. With Axis's guidance, Leman Russ should too. Never mind, Leman Russ said, standing. There's no rush. Ki probably can't be mastered overnight. We'll keep practicing, and you can teach me bit by bit. All right, Axis agreed. We'll take our time. We'll practice more, and you'll learn it as we go. For the next several months, outside of eating and sleeping, Axis spent his days sparring with Leman Russ in the wilderness. After each session, they climbed to the mountaintop, where Axis tried again to teach Leman Russ how to perceive ki. But Leman Russ had no natural sense for it. He couldn't even tell that it existed. Axis insisted that ki was an energy every living being possessed, but to Leman Russ it simply wasn't there. It began to look as if Kai belonged exclusively to Axis. Axis grew anxious and began experimenting. He channeled his own Kai into Leman Russ to guide him, letting his energy flow through the other's body to show the feeling. Strange as it was, Axis's ki would settle in Leman Russ for a few seconds, but then vanish, like a stream that runs dry. Within 10 or 12 seconds, the energy Axis injected dissipated entirely. Leman Russ could feel that foreign power while it lasted, but he couldn't keep or control it. His body seemed instinctively unable to accept it. How could this be? Axis tried to find out. He gathered tribal warriors whose combat power exceeded 10 points and taught them ki with the same methods, even guiding them using his own ki. They practiced seriously and worked hard, but like Leman Russ, they simply couldn't grasp it. For 6 months, Axis taught and practiced with Leman Russ and the tribesmen, but nobody could master ki. Eventually, everyone gave up. Give it up, little wolf cub, Leman Russ said one evening, patting Axis on the shoulder. It seems this power is unique to you. No one else can learn it. It's truly strange, Axis admitted, stroking his chin. By logic, ki should be universal to all living beings. At least we didn't get nothing out of it, Leman Russ added. Your combat ability improved a lot. Indeed, Axis's combat power had jumped dramatically, up by 350 points, bringing him to a total of 500. Because he practiced ki so frequently, Axis had learned to fly, and his command of the energy had become far more fluent. It looks like you won't be able to teach this in the short term, Axis said. I suspect there's something odd about this planet itself. After a year and a half on the frozen world they called Fenris, Axis had begun to piece together its strangeness. Evidence of prior colonization was everywhere. When he flew higher, he saw the rusting skeletons of advanced machinery and structures, clearly remnants of an interstellar civilization that had long since fallen into disuse. The ruins were old, but their technology had been far beyond what the current inhabitants knew. Even more peculiar was the planet's calendar. One Fenris year equaled more than 3 Earth years, about 40 months. but the people here still measured age using a 365-day year and months of 30 days, just like Earth's calendar. The planet had a strong, almost unnatural echo of Earth in many details. 6. Shocking. Fenris is a Norse mythology theme park. Axis felt a chill run through him. This was very strange. He had 1,000 questions, but he didn't dare ask them out loud. There were remnants of an interstellar civilization here, and the planet had uncanny similarities to Earth. Not the Earth of the Dragon Ball world, but the Earth he had originally come from. He had been watching Fenris's night sky and recognized constellations that should only be visible from Earth: the Large Magellanic Cloud, the Small Magellanic Cloud, even the Big Dipper. Could this planet be that close to Earth? The name Fenris, after the wolf of Norse myth, didn't help calm him. When he had escaped in his ship, he had the sensation of passing through a strange pocket of space before entering a normal universe and landing on this world. Was it possible he wasn't in the Dragon Ball universe anymore? The people here couldn't learn to use ki, but he could. There were too many Earth-like clues. Bold and terrified at the same time, Axis formed a hypothesis. Fenris had been colonized by humans from Earth. If that were true, if he wasn't in the Dragon Ball universe, then maybe he could really go home. His heart thumped at the thought of returning to his true Earth. He went to find Leman Russ. "Russ, there's something I want to ask you. Can you help me? My little wolf cub, speak. Anything I can do, I will, for I am the king of Fenris." Leman Russ nodded. "Can you find me the history of this planet? I want to understand Fenris's past." "History?" Leman Russ shrugged. "You mean the past. Why are you interested? The past is gone." Fenris was harsh. Its people had never cared for long records. They lived for the present and the future and what they needed to survive. "I need to confirm something important," Axis said. The planet clearly bore signs of an old colony. Who had colonized it? Earthlings, or some other humanoid aliens? If this were still the Dragon Ball world, any return of those colonizers might attract the attention of the Great King's evil legion. He had to know. "There are no real historical records," Leman Russ admitted. "We don't keep histories. We pass survival skills down to our children, but nothing like a recorded past." Axis smiled. "My little ship has a very advanced AI. We can go to those large steel ruins and let my ship's computer try to decode whatever we bring back." "You mean your ship can interface with the ancient machinery?" Leman Russ asked. "Yes, if the damage isn't too bad, I can read them. Then when I return to the tribe, I'll have them haul some stuff back from the ruins," Leman Russ said. Axis took to the sky. He always flew when he went home, while Leman Russ rode back on his giant wolf. Watching him go, Leman Russ couldn't hide his envy. He coveted Axis's ability to fly. Back at the tribe, Leman Russ ordered warriors to salvage scrap from the old ruins. In half a month, dozens of rusted machines were delivered to Axis's hut. After tinkering, Axis found 3 computers that were barely functional. The rest were irreparably damaged by time. He connected the 3 to his ship and started the decryption routines. The ship's AI worked through the corrupted files and began producing readable output. Axis watched as data unspooled across the screen. Then he saw the lines that made his breath catch. "Human Tourism World Fenris Norse Theme Park, year hated 525, 25,000 records. Norse Mythology Theme Park. Modified planetary weather regime. Template Fenris winter, 3 years harsh winter, 1 year summer. Introduced native organisms modified by genetic engineering. Imported Earth organisms. Genetically altered snow wolves to create giant Norse myth wolves. Engineered the world's serpent. Created multiple Norse mythological fauna and released them into Fenris theme park to receive tourists from across Terra." Axis stared at the output in disbelief. If the files were genuine, Fenris had once been an Earth colony, turned into a Norse-themed tourism world. The weather had been artificially imposed, native life engineered, mythic beasts manufactured to delight visitors. His hands shook. How is this possible?" he muttered. Excitement and dread tangled in his chest. If the data was true, he might no longer be in the Dragon Ball universe. He rushed to Leman Russ's reception hall to tell him the discovery. When he burst in, Leman Russ was entertaining a stranger. The man was cloaked and exceptionally tall, taller than even Leman Russ. Axis paused, taking in the stranger's presence, then hurried forward. "Russ, I have a major discovery. Have you ever heard of Earth?" Axis blurted, breathless. Before Russ could answer, the cloaked man slowly lifted his head. From the shadow beneath the hood, two deep eyes regarded them. His voice was low, resonant, and touched with a strange nostalgia. Earth, he said. Such a nostalgic name. We call it now Terra, Holy Terra. Axis felt his heart drop. Terra, Holy Terra. The word sat heavy in the room, carrying histories and powers that made the hair on his arms rise. Whatever universe he had stumbled into was far more complex and far more dangerous than he'd imagined. Chapter 7. This is Warhammer. Are Saiyans considered human? Axis stood frozen, feeling increasingly convinced someone had made a terrible mistake. He had just crossed over from the Dragon Ball world, so how had he ended up in the grim darkness of Warhammer? There was no top-tier system, no lucky golden finger, nothing to make this easier. All he had was Saiyan blood, a weird hand from some distant god, and a growing sense of dread. He'd actually preferred the Dragon Ball timeline. The scenery was beautiful, people were interesting, and early threats were manageable. Aside from the occasional tyrant like the Great King, it was the kind of world you could lay low in, train, grow stronger, avoid the main plot points. With his Saiyan heritage, steady training, and a single Super Saiyan transformation would put him into the top tier, so long as he kept his distance from the Earth where the main characters were active. Even without reaching Super Saiyan, a combat power over 10,000 could make him lord over one or two planets. And when Earth finally quieted down, he could sneak away, collect the Dragon Balls, and wish for something like immortality. Then he could truly just lie flat and be left alone. Instead, the universe had apparently taken pity on his sense of irony. Of all places to drop him into, why Warhammer? If the universe had to be cruel, why not Marvel or DC at least? Those worlds had world-ending crises, but also allies. Here, Axis felt naked. Then it clicked. The man who'd adopted and raised him wasn't some mutated Fenrisian native with hill-sized strength. He was a gene-seed Primarch, Leman Russ, the Wolf King himself. And the taller, colder man sitting before them? Obviously the human emperor, assembling his gene-seed Primarchs. Everything inside Axis went prickly. The Imperium didn't tolerate Xenos. The Emperor's imperial truth had driven the eradication of alien life for 10,000 years. A discovered Xeno species didn't get diplomatic envoys. It got exterminated. And Axis was not exactly a textbook human. He had a tail, and his bloodline was alien. If the Emperor knew, he forced himself to breathe calmly. He wasn't completely hopeless. Saiyans were physiologically very close to humans. Their skulls were rounded. They could interbreed with humans. There was no reproductive isolation. He could pass. He had to. From this moment, he would be human. If he'd revealed his Saiyan nature earlier, if Huang Laohan had been around to take offense, he knew he'd be dead already. Leman Russ laughed heartily, unaware of Axis's inner panic. Axis, my little wolf cub, what's with that face? Why are you suddenly asking about Earth and this stranger? You said his name is Holy Terra? Axis forced a smile and kept his ki under tight control so his body language looked natural. He had already lost his original tail, an accident during a previous sparring session. His little ship's artificial moonlight had tricked him into a great ape transformation, and in the fight that followed, Russ had seen the danger and cut the tail off before Axis could do irreparable damage. It was a mercy. At the time, Axis's base power was around 400. The great ape multiplied that to about 4,000, enough to lay a planet waste. Ever since, the tail had never regrown. That omission probably saved his life in the Imperium. I dug through some old databases on that computer you recovered, Axis said. Fenris was once a human colony from Earth, so if that's true, then we are all human. The Emperor looked at him with that unblinking, godlike composure. Is that so? So you consider yourselves human? He asked, though it sounded more like a statement than a question. Russ grinned. He's clever. He pulled it out of the ruins. The tall man's gaze flicked over Axis in a single, clinical sweep. He came from a distant place, Russ offered. We were just about to speak when you arrived. The Emperor's inspection was brief but decisive. This youth is strong. No signs of radiation mutation. Skull is rounded. Pure human. His tone was casual. Axis felt like an ordinary child on a trading caravan. The Emperor's mind was not on minutiae like hairstyle. To the master of mankind, the gene-seed Primarchs were a different order of life, beyond normal humans, and not able to reproduce with them. Any ordinary, rounded-headed youngster at Russ's side would be an adopted son, perhaps one who might someday undergo the Astartes surgical modifications if he was young enough. Axis exhaled silently. Scions could biologically reproduce with humans. That fact, he told himself tightly, made him passable. In terms of aura and appearance, he could be treated as human. Russ reached out and ruffled Axis's hair. "That's right. He's my little wolf cub," he said with an obvious fondness. "You've been well on this world, little one." Then the Emperor stood, and the way he said his next words sent a shiver across the gathered warriors. "I am your father, your true father, and I am the Lord of mankind. Kneel before me and swear your loyalty." For a heartbeat, everything went still. Then the camp erupted in scornful laughter. Russ barked a laugh that echoed like thunder across the ice plains. "Ha ha! This man, he asks the great Wolf King to kneel? Truly, this is rich." Even with the Emperor's presence and his towering authority, the tribal warriors didn't take him seriously in that moment. Axis watched the exchange between God Emperor and Primarch happen like thunder and sea. He tightened his stance and kept his face expressionless, determined to blend in. If he could keep his secret and stay out of the spotlight, maybe, just maybe, he could survive this universe long enough to find a way back, or at least to live another day. 8. Emperor of Mankind, 3 games. What's so funny? I am the human emperor. You may call me that, or you may call me father. His voice was calm but carried an undeniable authority. Leman Russ, the Wolf King, sat on his throne with a mocking smirk, looking at the man who claimed to be his biological father, Lord of Mankind, the human emperor. "It's rich," Russ said bluntly. "I'm the king here. You come in demanding the king kneel and call you father? My father is dead. Before he died, he made me chieftain, and I led our warriors to conquer this world. I am the Wolf King. You were raised by an adoptive father, as is this child before you. I am your true sire. You are my gene seed offspring. My blood flows in you." The Emperor's words were measured, each one heavy with implication. Russ barked a harsh laugh. "So what? Am I supposed to cry, kneel and call you daddy, and then you cry and call me son?" His tone dripped contempt. "That won't be necessary," the human emperor replied. "I am launching a great crusade to save humanity. It may last centuries or millennia. You were born for that purpose. I need you to join me." "Ha ha ha! The human emperor, is it? Beat it. I have no interest in your crusade." Russ waved a hand dismissively. He loved life among his wolves, sparring with his cub, hunting with his warriors. He was content and had no desire to become someone's subordinate on a crusade. "I regret to inform you, the choice is not yours. When the Great Crusade has finished, you may return here and live as you wish. But that must wait until humanity is saved." The Emperor's voice never rose, but it left no room for argument. Before Russ could reply, the Emperor threw back his cloak to reveal a shining suit of golden armor. He seemed taller, more imposing. A force of power rolled off him like a physical pressure. The effect was immediate. Everyone present fell to their knees except Leman Russ and a small, wide-eyed boy at Russ's side, Axis. The Emperor studied Axis with a flash of interest. This child's physique is formidable. The psychic weight he projected would crush a normal Astartes, and yet the boy stood. Axis was in trouble. The pressure in his mind felt like drowning. His vision swam. He ground his teeth and forced his chi to circulate, letting it reinforce his body and keep him from blacking out. Sweat chilled his brow. Deep inside him, something like a great ape roared, a visceral surge that pushed back against the Emperor's psychic presence. That roaring power effectively countered the pressure. Russ planted himself between the Emperor and Axis, eyes blazing. "If you mean to fight, then I'll fight you to the end," he said. The golden-armored man radiated such terrible force that Russ felt how easy it would be for him to be struck down. "I only restrained them. I did them no harm," the Emperor replied. He gave a small, approving nod toward Axis. "Your adopted son has impressed me. I admit I underestimated him." The Emperor did not sense the telltale fluctuations of a psyker in Axis. He found instead raw physical power. That was rarer, and from the Emperor's perspective, less risky. Psychic gifts were potent but wild and easy prey for chaos. A child with such physical strength was a different kind of asset. Finding his son might have come with an unexpected bonus. Russ's chest swelled with that old Fenrisian stubbornness. We have a tradition, he said. If two cannot resolve a dispute, we settle it with 3 trials. Beat me, and I will listen. If I win, you leave. You would compete with me? The Emperor asked, a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. The 3 things we Fenrisians love most: eating, drinking, and wrestling, Russ answered with unshakable confidence. On Fenris, no one drank like Russ. He might be best at eating too. Axis, the little wolf cub, showed promise, but wasn't yet a rival. As for fighting, Russ had honed his strength over countless skirmishes, and in the last 6 months of sparring with Axis, he'd only grown stronger. The Emperor's smile widened. He agreed, and the warriors who had been frozen returned to motion, bustling to prepare a feast. Soon, mountains of meat and loaves and smoked furs were laid out. The first trial was predictably one-sided. Russ ate with ravenous, practiced efficiency. The Emperor, although still formidable, ate less than a third of Russ's portion. Victory went to the Wolf King. Russ crowed with triumph. This stranger might be mighty, but in the simple pleasures of Fenris, he was no match. For the second trial, the warriors rolled out great barrels of honeymead. The Emperor sat calmly, lifted a cup, smiled at Axis, and drank. Russ, however, dragged a whole barrel to his lips and guzzled wildly. While the Emperor had finished 2 measured cups, Russ had drained 3 enormous barrels. "Ha! I win this round," Russ bellowed, hefting the empty barrel and slamming it down. He was already drunk and thoroughly convinced of his supremacy. "Russ, don't be careless," Axis blurted, unable to help himself. He watched the Emperor with nervous awe. How strong would the Emperor be in a contest of combat? He wondered, not for the first time, how the Emperor's might would translate into some far-off measure of power, how he would fare in a place of pure destructive scaling. Russ laughed and slapped Axis on the shoulder. "Relax, little cub. This stranger is nothing. You could take him. Why don't you take my place for the 3rd trial?" Axis's mouth fell open. "Me? Fight the Emperor? Are you kidding me?" 9. Axis versus Emperor, Part 1. Axis's heart sank when he heard Leman Russ's words. He cursed inwardly. "Are you serious? Fight the strongest human in history, the Emperor?" The Emperor had not yet ascended the Golden Throne, nor had he become the God Emperor who could wound the ruinous powers of Nurgle. Even so, he was without question the most powerful human who had ever lived. His deeds were the stuff of legend. His most famous feat was sealing a star god's fragment, the Void Dragon. The tale said that a knight in golden armor, sword in hand, had defeated the evil dragon and sealed it on Mars. Later, during the Zidon campaign, the Emperor would pull the Void Dragon out of the labyrinth of eternal night, utterly defeat the Raiden, and turn the tide between the Imperium of man and the Raiden. Those events were still in the future, and the first Zidon campaign hadn't even begun, but the legends were enough. What kind of being was the Void Dragon? When released, it had destroyed several Necron dynastic tomb worlds. Destroying a planet seemed like a casual gesture for it, and it could snuff out stars. The Emperor beating the Void Dragon in single combat said everything Axis needed to know. This was a fighter of unimaginable power. If Axis compared him to figures in other universes, the Emperor's strength probably rivaled Frieza's, maybe surpassed him. Axis felt small by comparison. If only he could turn Super Saiyan. Right now, he was nothing but a little wolf cub. Still, the Emperor smiled, amusement in his voice. "Oh, you want your adopted son to face me in the 3rd round? Do you truly stake your fate on this child?" Leman Russ laughed. "Even an adult gene seed Primarch? I could handle them easily. I could still thrash one with one hand tied behind my back." Russ barked a bigger laugh and shook his head. "Stranger, don't underestimate Axis. If you do, you'll lose badly. I wasn't as strong as him at his age. My little wolf cub's power is exceptional. In the whole tribe, aside from me, he's the strongest." Those words changed the Emperor's expression. He narrowed his eyes and regarded Axis with renewed interest and a flicker of disbelief. Leman Russ claimed this child's power exceeded that of a gene seed Primarch of the same age. The Emperor knew what gene seed Primarchs were. He had shaped them himself, even bartered with the warp for knowledge and soul fragments to create those near-divine humans. A young gene seed Primarch could defeat Eldari warriors. Their combat prowess far outstripped the original Space Marines. 7-year-old Primarchs already towered over 2 meters, their strength surpassing the first founding Marines, and could rival the Custodes. As they matured, even the custodes would struggle against them. The custodes were the Emperor's finest human warriors, augmented by custom bioalchemy and ancient technologies to be almost on par with the Emperor himself. For Leman Russ to say Axis surpassed such beings made the Emperor sit up and take notice. "If you say so, I am curious," the Emperor said. "I agree to the contest." Russ clapped, delighted. "Did you hear that, little wolf cub? He agreed to fight you. Let's go to where we usually spar." Axis stared at his adoptive father, speechless and inwardly exasperated. "So it's true, once the Emperor notices me, there's no backing down. Fine, if I must fight, I will." He forced a composed nod. "Since Russ put it that way, I'll give it a try." Russ patted his shoulder. "Good, little wolf cub." They walked to the field where Axis and Russ usually sparred, a vast frozen wasteland pocked with scars of past clashes. The ground was gouged and broken. Nearby mountains were shattered. The devastation testified to repeated, devastating confrontations. This was no place for mere skirmishes. The Emperor frowned as he surveyed the battlefield, intrigued. Could such a powerful child truly have been born naturally among men? Russ stood aside, arms crossed, smiling. "Let me make one thing clear. Letting you fight my little wolf cub is only to qualify you to fight me. Beat him, and you still have to face me." The Emperor nodded. "Very well. I'm curious about this child. Show me what you can do." Axis inhaled and stepped forward, assuming a fighting stance. "Attack with everything you've got. If you make me take one step back, you win. I promise I won't let you be harmed in this bout." The Emperor remained calm, hands behind his back. Axis felt the fight blood in his veins ignite. He focused every ounce of ki he had and blurred into motion. Before anyone could track him, he was an afterimage rushing toward the Emperor. His speed was extreme. In an instant, he was in front of the man and threw a punch aimed straight at the Emperor's chest. Just before his fist could strike, something invisible pushed him away. It felt like hitting a solid wall. The rebound sent him flying backward, tumbling toward the icy ground, except another unseen force caught him mid-fall, preventing any injury. What is this power?" Axis gasped, stunned. The Emperor regarded him with a hint of a smile. "This is called psychic power. It has many uses. It can manipulate frost, fire, lightning. It can be telekinetic, snatching objects or crushing them from a distance. It can also form an invisible shield to protect or restrain you." 10. Axis vs. Emperor, Part 2. The Emperor's psychic power washed over both Leman Russ and Axis like an earthquake. Psychers link their souls to the warp and channel its energy into the real universe. That channeling is psychic power. In the Warhammer galaxy, it was the single most overwhelming force. Everything in the material world obeyed physical law, but psychic power did not. It was the only true supernatural force, with endless applications. Seers who could glimpse the future, psychers who could bend the wills of every living thing on an entire planet, read minds, erase memories, reverse time within a zone, summon spectral doubles to fight, and unleash a staggering variety of other abilities. Axis gritted his teeth. A Saiyan did not give up so easily. He drew on his ki again, focusing all of it into his fist, and charged the Emperor like a cannonball. His punch sliced the air with a whistling sound, as if trying to tear the world itself. "Ha!" he roared, throwing everything he had at the gold-armored man. The Emperor only lifted one hand, palm toward Axis. An instant psychic eruption flared outward and an invisible barrier snapped into existence. Axis's fist froze less than an inch from that palm, unable to move forward another fraction, no matter how hard he pushed. The Emperor stood there, calm, a faint smile on his face. "A good attack," he said, "but far from enough." Axis spun back, flipping in the air and delivering a sidekick aimed at the Emperor's head, but the invisible force held. He tried trick after trick, striking from every angle, but nothing could break the psychic defense. "Your strength is indeed great," the Emperor said calmly, "but before my psychic power, it is still too weak." For all the composure in his voice, his gaze on Axis had changed. What tenacity! What fierce strength! If this had been an ordinary 7-year-old, he would have stopped after such a setback. Yet in this child's eyes, he saw only hunger for battle, a born warrior's thirst. Axis felt pressure close in from all sides, like the world itself was trying to crush him. He clenched his teeth and fought the force, but could not tear free of the Emperor's psychic restraint. Is this the Emperor's power? Axis thought, shaken. He had known the Emperor was potent, but not like this. His pride in Saiyan strength felt fragile beneath this dominance, and yet exhilaration bloomed inside him. This was the kind of impossible mountain a Saiyan craved to climb. I must know. I will surpass you. One day I will defeat you. Axis, use your ki. Show him what ki can do. Leman Russ shouted from the sidelines. Ah! Axis roared in answer. A crimson-white aura flared around him as his Saiyan bloodline cut through his limits, pushing his combat power higher. The Emperor watched with interest. This was neither psychic power nor a simple material force. Intriguing. Could there be powers in this universe he did not yet understand? Axis surged upward and spread his hands. An invisible white energy coalesced in his palms. Kikoho, he shouted, focusing every ounce of power into one single blast. A massive white wave rocketed toward the Emperor. A golden energy dome formed around the Emperor, and the wave struck it and stalled. Axis's strongest Qigong blast failed to shatter the psychic shield. From the start, the Emperor's feet had not budged a centimeter. Exhausted, Axis fell from the sky. The Emperor extended his psychic power into the shape of a giant, invisible hand and caught him as he descended, gently lowering him to the ground. He had said he would not let the child come to harm. He meant it. All right, the match ends here, the Emperor said, withdrawing his power. I now know how strong your power is, child. The pressure vanished. Axis collapsed to the snow, panting. Leman Russ's smile faded as he hurried over and patted the boy's shoulder. You all right, my little wolf cub? This kid had grown since their fight a few days ago, Russ thought, yet he still could not overcome the man before them. Axis forced a smile. I'm fine, Russ. He's just too strong, impossibly strong. The Emperor had fought him purely defensively the whole time. He hadn't even been trying. Leman Russ looked up at the Emperor, conflicted. You are far stronger than I, but I still want to fight you. Do you wish to rest a moment? He did not want to fight unfairly. Even if the Emperor had seemed relaxed against Axis, Russ still offered him the chance to pause. Not at all necessary, the Emperor replied with a smile. My endurance is boundless. Come at me whenever you wish. If immortals could recover like that, Russ thought he would be hard-pressed. The Emperor could spar for months and never tire. Leman Russ laughed, a booming sound across the frozen wastes. Very well then, I will not hold back. Be careful, Russ, Axis warned. If you can't win, surrender. Ha, little wolf cub, watch me take revenge for you. Russ turned to the Emperor, battle fire in his eyes. He bared his fangs in a grin, muscles coiled like a beast about to spring. Pride and the call of combat would not let him back down. If he retreated, he would no longer be a wolf of Fenris. The fierce duel between the two was about to erupt. 11. Leman Russ versus the Emperor. The Emperor watched Leman Russ with a faint, approving smile. Come at me. Use your strongest power, he said. Awo! Leman Russ answered with a wolfish howl, stamping the frozen earth so hard the ice cracked under his feet. He charged like a living battering ram. In an instant, he covered the ground between them and swung a massive fist at the Emperor's chest, wind whistling as it cleaved the air. The blow had the force to level mountains, yet the Emperor stood unmoved, a placid smile on his face. With a casual lift of one hand, he stopped the punch as if it were a child's slap. This time, the Emperor chose not to rely on psychic might. He would test the Primarch in the one arena Fenrisites prized most, close quarters. It was, in a way, a father and son game. Russ would not be persuaded by sorcery alone. If he was to be convinced, he needed to be bested at what he loved. The Emperor, for his part, reminded himself, my strength is not only in the mind. In hand-to-hand combat, I am still the measure of men. Interesting. Again, Russ roared. He twisted his body and launched a thunderous sidekick toward the Emperor's head. The strike cleaved the air and sounded like a cannon blast. Still, the Emperor merely lifted a hand and caught the attack with effortless grace, as if toying with a savage animal. Then the Emperor's hands moved like a sudden summer storm, raining blows across Leman Russ's face. The earlier spar with Axis had been play. This was a proper test of a matured gene-seed Primarch. Russ could not read the trajectories of the Emperor's strikes. He simply took them, passive and unretaliating. Blow after blow landed, turning the Primarch into a battered bundle of muscle and fur. Pain bloomed beneath jaw and skin. Is this your strength? Too weak. the Emperor chided lightly, amusement in his tone. Russ, have you been eating well, or had too much drink? Your punches don't even match that little fellow's earlier. Instead of anger, the words stirred something fierce in Russ. He stepped back, clenched his fists, and his muscles swelled. A faint silver sheen crawled across his skin. The wolf blood in him flared, fangs lengthened, claws ripped out from his knuckles, eyes burning a deep, bloody red. He had never fully unleashed this aspect of himself before. He let the wolf rise. The Emperor's lips curved. When Primarch 6 was shaped, he had woven in canine elements, subtle chimera work that would favor survival on Fenris. Those teeth and claws were no mere ornament. A true bite from Leman Russ could tear through auramite armor and cleave weapons. Even his gene-seed sons bore teeth that could gnaw through alloys and ceramite. Ah! Now that's more like it. Show me everything you've got, the Emperor invited. Russ answered with another feral howl and surged forward. He moved faster, his form a blur, trades of fist and claw striking like a storm. The two wolf brothers who had grown up with him howled in sympathy at his roar and rushed forward to assist, but Russ waved them off. This was his fight alone. None would interfere. They traded strikes, golden fists against savage claws, air trembled with each collision. Yet no combination, no thunderous assault could unsettle the Emperor. He stood as an immovable mountain, one hand folded behind his back, using only a palm and wrist to parry and absorb attacks that would have shattered lesser men. Leman Russ's blows tore through the frozen plain with whistling, world-shaking force, his fangs flashing and eyes wild with the joy of battle. But the Emperor remained composed, unimpressed, unshaken. When the Emperor struck, it was like iron upon iron. His fists landed across Russ's chest, shoulders, and belly with the terrible inevitability of hammer blows. Each hit rocked the Primarch to his core. For the first time in his remembered life, Russ felt his bones protest. Even at the peak of his lupine fury, he could not match that steady, overwhelming power. Hours passed. Russ kept fighting, sustained by sheer will more than technique. His blows grew blunted and empty. His movements were the motions of habit rather than the artistry of a warrior. The light in his eyes began to dim. The Emperor watched, regret and resolve folded into the same expression, and with a single, precise sweep of his leg, he sent Leman Russ sprawling to the snow. Russ lay there, winded and unable to rise. He could not even close his eyelids without effort. He had been broken, not broken in spirit but in body, humbled completely by the man who called himself his father. The two wolf brothers padded up at once, whimpering and planting themselves by his side. They snarled low and fixated on the Emperor, but the matter had been settled. "Do you surrender now, my son?" the Emperor asked softly, looking down at the fallen wolf. Russ breathed in raggedly, a humorless laugh rasping out of him. "Heh! You're stronger than I thought. You win." He pushed the words out between labored breaths. "As we agreed, I will join you on the Great Crusade and pledge my loyalty to you, Father." "I believe you will only grow stronger," the Emperor said. "You are a combat-oriented gene-seed Primarch." He had created 21 gene-seed Primarchs, each with a role. Some were leaders, some administrators, some focused on development, on the intellect sanctum, on psychic powers, and some were forged purely for war. Leman Russ had been given canine traits. One day he would be the executioner of the Imperium. "Is that so? Then I have brothers. What number am I?" Russ sat up, eager. "You are the 6th I created," the Emperor replied. "Number 6. "Not bad," Russ grinned. "So I have a whole line of brothers. Am I the only one who went missing out there?" "You were the 2nd Primarch I found," the Emperor said. "The first was Horus, Primarch of the 16th. There are stories. Alfarius claims he never left Holy Terra, that I secretly raised him here. But that is his claim. In official record, Horus was the first I discovered." Russ's grin deepened. "I look forward to meeting him. Does that mean I have my own legion?" "Indeed." The Emperor's tone turned patient and explanatory. "For each of my Primarchs, I used their gene seed to create Astartes legions. The Astartes are superhuman warriors, space marines, grown from the gene seed drawn from 20 of the Primarchs. Each Astartes is, in a crude way, a copy of his Primarch. Their very foundations come from you. Every Astartes of the 6th Legion will be your sons in blood. You will be their gene father." After implantation and 19 organ modifications, They gain strength far beyond mortal men and lifespans that dwarf any humans. They will be the primary spear of the Great Crusade. When you return, you will command your own 6th Legion. The Astartes were the Emperor's pride, less volatile than the Thunder Warriors, but more reliable, efficient, and suitable for mass production. You said you made 21 Primarchs. Why are there only 20 legions? Russ asked, puzzled. Some matters are Imperial secrets you are not yet permitted to know, the Emperor said. What matters for you is that when you return, you will have an Astartes Legion. You may recruit from this world. Your tribesmen can undergo Astartes augmentation to become Space Marines. The process that had created the Primarchs and the exact details of the gene seed were secret even from the Primarchs themselves, known only to Lord High Counselor Micardo and a few in the inner circle. So my warriors can all become Astartes? Russ pressed. The thought of immortal, battle-born sons delighted him. They can. The Emperor smiled. The younger recruits have the best chance. Adolescents at puberty are ideal for the surgery and have the highest success rates. And my adult warriors? The old ones who fought by my side? Russ asked. For adults, there is a special procedure I devised. It is a stripped-down modification, not as potent as the full Astartes enhancements, but its success rate is effectively 100%. It lacks some of the raw power yet guarantees survival. There is also the option to try the full procedure, but the adult's success rate is lower. Russ's brow furrowed. The Emperor's aside explained much. Primarchs would meet people of all ages and stations. Their allies, foster fathers, and brothers could be invaluable. A safe, reliable augmentation for adults ensured those bonds could be preserved. Luther, the Emperor noted once, had taken that safer route. Leman Russ asked one last thing. He pointed at the boy sitting beside them, Axis, and asked, "How do your Astartes compare to him?" Axis, who had been listening with detached amusement, rolled his eyes inwardly. Don't underestimate a scion, he thought. He wasn't mocking the Space Marines out of arrogance so much as certainty. As an adult, he could raise a city with a thought, perhaps more. Could an Astartes do that with nothing but their body? The only real advantage the Astartes had, Axis admitted, was lifespan. Scions lived long by human standards, but not like an Astartes. And could the gene seed even be implanted into a scion without corrupting their bloodline? That was the real concern. His heritage might be the single most important weapon he had in this universe. He could not surrender it lightly. Without weapons, an Astartes would be far weaker than Axis, the Emperor said plainly. With weapons and war gear, they are different, formidable in other ways. Russ laughed, triumphant. You hear that? Axis, soon you'll be one of my true sons, my gene seed offspring. His smugness was short-lived. The Emperor's next words cut it short. No, this child will not be your gene-fathered son. He will not become an Astartes. I have different plans for him. Russ bristled. Why not? He's my little wolf cub. Because I am his superior in purpose, the Emperor replied calmly, and because you have already sworn yourself to me and pledged to obey my commands. Russ fell silent. The weight of the Emperor's authority left him with nothing to say. Axis spoke then, voice steady and curious. Then what do you have planned for me, Emperor? Chapter 13. Personalized Custom Enhancement, Custodian Guards. Child, your strength is immense. Even the Primarchs I forged with Gene Seed did not possess your current power at so young an age. Your existence fills me with wonder. You may not understand how powerful those Primarchs are, but know this. They represent the summit of human capability. They are humanity's finest in every respect, yet you can rival or even surpass them in combat power. That is remarkable, the Emperor said, crouching before Axis. Thank you for the compliment, Axis replied. He did not deny it. Scions might not have many social graces, but in raw fighting power they were elite. Still, beyond pure combat strength, he could not hope to match the Primarchs in many other ways. Some Primarchs aged so slowly that 1,000 years would barely show on them. Lion L. Johnson only showed gray after 10,000 years. And Vulcan, Lord of Drakes, possessed an effectively immortal body that could be reborn so long as his soul endured. The Primarchs were unique. Their creation used fragments of lesser warp gods and the Emperor's own genius. They were masterpieces. I will give you a personalized gene enhancement, the Emperor continued. Without damaging your native genes, I will perform a comprehensive enhancement tailored specifically to you. Axis's combat power already approached that of a young Primarch, perhaps even exceeded it. If he matured naturally, his potential would be tremendous. But his genetic makeup was unusual, so unusual that implanting a standard Astartes gene seed and turning him into a mass-produced space marine would not serve him. It would blunt his future malleability and reduce his potential. His innate genetic strength outpaced a typical Astartes, so what he needed was a bespoke procedure. "You will be a custodian," the Emperor said, pride in his voice. "You may not fully grasp what that means. In terms of physical power in the Imperium, apart from myself and the Primarchs, the Custodian Guard are the strongest without exception. And every Custodian's enhancement is entirely custom-made." The Astartes were mass-produced soldiers. In the Emperor's view, the consummate human form was the Custodian Guard. He estimated that once Axis reached full maturity, his combat power could rival a Primarch's. Under Custodian modification, it would leap even higher. In time, Axis could become a Custodian whose very presence could challenge a Primarch. The Emperor was not planning to make Axis an ordinary Custodian or a simple captain. He intended him to be Valdor's successor as the next Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes. The Emperor's gaze on Axis burned with the vision of a future commander whose power might eclipse even that of the Primarchs. Axis was stunned. He had never imagined his path would bypass the Astartes entirely and instead lead to the Adeptus Custodes. Custodians were among the Imperium's ultimate warriors. They did not graft foreign genes so much as perfect their own, and with Scion genes already so potent, enhancing them promised enormous gains. Custodians also enjoyed far greater lifespans than Space Marines, another major advantage. Are the Custodians that much stronger than Space Marines? If so, why not mass-produce them? Leman Russ asked, hand on his chin. If Custodians were so superior, wouldn't it make sense to make more of them? "They are my most perfect masterpieces," the Emperor replied. Also called the Legio Custodes, they are the Imperium's finest. Each one costs the equivalent of thousands of Space Marines. Their numbers are already near the limit. 10,000 is nearly the maximum, so they cannot be mass-produced like the Astartes. Custodians were trained from youth, and their personalized modifications and lifelong training came at enormous cost. Their armor and weapons were beyond comparison. A Custodian's suit was not forged from ceramite or adamantium, but from auramite, a rare metal that is quantum inert and highly resistant to psychic and other energies. A single suit of Custodian armor, let alone their weapons and accoutrements, could be worth a world. "I see, so they're absurdly expensive," Russ said, nodding his understanding. The Custodians were indeed superior to the Astartes in every way except mass producibility. For Axis, this little wolf cub, the Custodian path would be the greatest boon. "There is no comparison," the Emperor agreed. "Go and consolidate your tribe. I will prepare transport ships for you. My flagship will remain in orbit above your world. Come to me when you are ready. I have prepared a Gloriana-class battleship to serve as your flagship." The Custodians were the Imperium's pride. The Space Marines were a mass-produced, stabilized successor to the Thunder Warriors. To compare them was an insult. Custodians combined unmatched individual combat skill, strategic mastery, and the capacity to operate alone, in teams, or to command legions. The Astartes' only advantage lay in numbers. By then, Russ had recovered. He rose, bowed to the Emperor, and left with Axis. Two of his wolf brothers fell in behind them. "Russ," Axis said before they departed, "even after the Custodian modification, I will still recognize you as my adoptive father. Once I finish my training and the enhancements, I will return to fight with you in the Great Crusade." The battlefield was where a Saiyan felt at home. Being a Custodian would not bind him to spend all his days at Terra's side. He would return to the fight when the time came. Chapter 14. "Ha! I knew it! Little wolf cub, you're still on my side. No way that bastard's taking you from me." Leman Russ laughed, pleased. After nearly 2 years of raising the youngster, of course Axis remained loyal. That old man might try to claim him, but not while Russ had a say. "Of course, I want to fight on the battlefield," Axis said. "You know what Custodes do. You heard about them. Their duty is to follow the Emperor or guard the palace on Holy Terra. I can't spend my life tacked onto one place." The Custodes undertook many secret missions. Axis knew, but their order was rigid. He wanted the augmentation surgery, not a life as a palace guard. Staying on Holy Terra would never feel as free as staying with the old wolf, so staying with Russ was the safer choice. But we'll have to be careful, Russ warned. My father is stubborn. He won't give you up easily. He values you. Russ hadn't expected that the first task on his return would be outwitting the Emperor, but no matter what, he would not allow Axis to be taken from him. That was non-negotiable. Axis grinned. Don't worry, I've already got a plan. You remember the ship I brought with me? Russ's eyes narrowed. What good stuff do you have, kid? Is it just an escape pod? That's not an escape pod. It's a real spacecraft, capable of hyperspace engine travel across the galaxy. Don't underestimate it. Axis's grin widened. He wasn't exaggerating. Saiyan's small craft were tiny and elegant, but they weren't mere lifeboats. They were true starships fitted with hyperspace engines. In the Emperor's terms, such a thing was priceless. In the dark, dangerous galaxy of the Warhammer universe, hyperspace engine travel was a technology almost unknown. Humanity, even in its golden age, the dark age of technology, had relied on warp travel. Only two known races could conduct real space hyperspace jumps without the warp. The Necrons, whose waking ships could bypass the warp, and the Tyranids, whose hive fleets moved through the void by their own means. Even the Old One's webway was carved from the seam between the warp and reality, functionally a different kind of warp travel, albeit far safer. The Emperor had gone to great lengths to excavate a webway on Holy Terra to escape the warp's dangers and someday free humanity from it. For him, a working hyperspace engine was beyond valuable. It was a way out of reliance on the warp. An item like that could make the Emperor ignore almost any cost, even, Axis thought with boldness, sacrificing a Primarch. Russ blinked. Hyperspace engine? What does that mean exactly? Think of it as a way to jump between star systems without entering the warp, Axis explained. My ship's design is advanced. It only holds one person, but it has a true hyperspace engine. It runs on dark matter energy drawn from the universe. If you could replicate the engine, it wouldn't need conventional fuel. As long as it's in space, it can travel. Saiyan craft were built to a cosmic standard. They were issued to Frieza's Legion and equipped with exotic technologies. Axis's small ship had more than just its engine. It carried a powered battlesuit of exceptional strength, discreet but terrifying defensive capability, several specialized laser weapons, and power-level scouters. When Axis fled Vegeta, he had smuggled out extra items, Saibaman seeds, medical pods from the Great King's Legion, and other oddities. The ship's manufacturing materials might even be replicated. Bulma could reproduce them on Earth, and Marscraft tech priests might reverse engineer them. And if Mars failed, the Emperor himself, leader, warrior, and driven scientist, would be capable. So you're planning to give the whole ship to my father? Russ asked, suspicion and hope warring in his tone. Could such a prize convince the Emperor to grant Axis the Custode's augmentation and still let him remain at Russ's side? Not all at once, Axis said. We can't just hand it over. We have to reel him in slowly. Don't reveal the hyperspace engine right away. Offer him other things from the ship first, enough to whet his appetite. The powered suit, the weapons, the scouters, small, valuable items he'll want immediately. Once he's invested, we can negotiate for the augmentation. We don't show him the whole hand. Russ's face split into a savage grin. Cunning little fox. I like it. They returned to the tribe and began to dismantle the craft in secret. Axis cataloged the items. The suit, thin as regular clothes, yet tougher than any armor Russ had seen. The compact laser weapons. The scouters that could measure power levels. A handful of Saibaman seeds wrapped carefully. The small medical pods taken from the Great King's Legion. And, hidden deep inside the ship's core, the hyperspace engine no larger than a chest plate, but humming with an alien potential that made both men's blood quicken. Axis explained how he would present the parts. Give him things he can't refuse, the sort of curiosities he wants to examine himself. Don't let him know about the engine until we have leverage. When he realizes what the ship can teach them about engine design, materials, energy management, he'll be eager. He'll be eager enough to bargain. And if he refuses? Russ asked softly. Axis glanced at the Primarch, then at the tiny ship strewn across their workshop like the bones of a god. Then we hold the engine. We make it clear it's not for his keeping. unless he gives us what we demand. But he won't refuse. Not when he knows the possibilities. Russ's wolfish grin returned. Good. We'll make him a deal he can't refuse and keep our cub. They worked through the night, separating components and securing the most sensitive pieces in hidden caches. For Axis, the gambit was simple and necessary. Trade trinkets and secrets to a ruler who craved domination of the stars, and in return, secure the freedom he loved. For Russ, it was about keeping the only companion he had in a universe that had taken so much from him. When the last crate was sealed and the ship's hull lay open and quiet beneath their hands, both men felt the weight of what they possessed. A single small craft, born of another universe, might be enough to bend the will of an emperor. Now, they would see if the emperor's hunger for secret technology outweighed his desire for a custodian's loyalty. If Axis's plan worked, he would walk into the palace and come out altered but still free. If it failed, they would have to choose between the ship and the future it promised, or the man at Russ's side. Chapter 15. Energy Gun, Battlesuit, Cultivators, King Vegeta's Password Box. Axis unloaded everything from the ship and began a full inventory. First came a stack of energy pistols used by miscellaneous soldiers. In the Frieza Force, such weapons were looked down upon by elite fighters. Only low-ranked troops tended to carry them, but their firepower was nothing to scoff at. They were beam weapons capable of blasting opponents with combat powers well over 100. They were certainly stronger than a bolter or a meltagun, though Axis couldn't say how they compared to a Necron Gauss flare. He intended to give one to the Emperor for inspection. These guns should be the easiest to reproduce. Low-grade Legion equipment, widely circulated, no tight technical secrecy. There were also several Saiyan battlesuits. Their defensive capability was striking, far superior to a Space Marine's power armor. Axis thought of Raditz arriving on Earth and shrugging off Piccolo's attack while wearing his suit. The armor had stopped blows in the hundreds and could resist damage well into the thousands. He even had Leman Russ test one. While Leman Russ wore the suit, full-power key attacks couldn't wound him. Power armor might look imposing, Axis reflected, but in the height of humanity, it had been ordinary equipment. In other words, a squad of Space Marines in their standard armor would not be as unassailable as legends suggested. For humans, though, the Saiyan suit was invaluable. If a Space Marine layered it beneath his own power armor, his defenses would increase dramatically. Axis also found a combat power scanner. It fit over the eye and could read an opponent's power level with precision, unless the opponent actively concealed their strength. This particular model was an older version and could only measure up to 22,000. Pushing it beyond that would cause it to fail catastrophically. Still, the device was upgradable. A few tweaks to its calculation range would fix the limitation, and Axis had little doubt the Emperor's technicians could retrofit these into Space Marine visors to great effect. All of these were standard issue on Saiyan infant expeditionary ships, basic gear handed to every low-class warrior when they left Vegeta. The infant ships had other features, too. An artificial moon projector that let Saiyans transform into great apes even on moonless worlds, robust life support that could keep even grievously wounded occupants alive temporarily. Vegeta had used one to limp back to Frieza's base, and a hibernation mode for long-distance travel. Axis's own origin was small and brutal. He had been sent out as an infant, and by age 4 he had completed his assignment on a primitive planet where the strongest natives barely reached 50 in combat power. After transforming into a great ape, he had dominated the world and returned to Vegeta. Once he'd confirmed the timeline, he began planning his escape and stole some of Vegeta's black tech on the way out. The most intriguing item he'd taken was a password box. It used capsule-like spatial storage similar to Capsule Corporation's technology on Earth, vast internal volume accessed through a small shell. The label read King Vegeta's. Axis suspected it contained the old king's prized possessions. He'd taken it with him, but it was locked behind an unknown password. Brutally forcing it open would destroy whatever lay inside, so he decided to wait until he was older and could find proper high-tech talent to crack King Vegeta's lock. He'd also taken seeds and culture fluid for the so-called cultivators, organic weapons the Saiyans had discovered on a conquered world. A cultivator seed needed only soil and would hatch in a minute. Its combat power depended entirely on the soil's quality. The best plots produced specimens with over 1/1200 combat power, while poorer ground yielded much weaker results. Top-tier cultivators could rival low-class Saiyan warriors, which was why they were rationed to high-ranking fighters. They were fiercely loyal only to strength. In the hands of the weak, they might turn hostile. They were terrifying, undying combatants that would fight to the death. Axis had also copied the cultivation methods, but those techniques required a large lab and significant technological investment, far more than he could manage now. Until his own power passed 5,000, cultivating them would be dangerous. The plants grown now would likely refuse to obey him. Besides, they would be alien horrors to human eyes, something the Emperor's court probably wouldn't accept. So the cultivators could not be handed over. Finally, Axis stored several medical pods in capsules. These were priceless. The pods could heal grievous wounds and regenerate lost limbs as long as the subject was still alive. A dozen hours inside could restore even near-fatal injuries. Son Goku's recovery after fighting Frieza and his subsequent transformation into a Super Saiyan had owed much to this technology. These pods were a godsend. Now the small pile of salvaged objects lay before him. Which of these should he present to the Emperor first? Chapter 16, Combat Power Calculation, the Wolf King's Premonition. After some thought, Axis decided to hand the energy gun, the power level scanner, and the protective suit to the Emperor. He planned to use them as bargaining chips to secure a place as a custodian guard and the chance to follow Wolf King Leman Russ. He hid the more important items, the password box, some capsules, and the hyperspace ship, then stepped outside. By then, Leman Russ had already announced to his people that he would present himself to the Emperor and join the Great Crusade. Warriors of Fenris, we march to a grand war. I have reunited with my father, the Lord of Mankind, the Emperor. All of you will have the chance to become my true sons, my wolf cubs. I will lead you from victory to victory. Leman Russ roared. Follow the great Wolf King, the Fenris warriors answered, raising weapons and howling. Axis watched and shook his head. If the surgical procedures that created Space Marines were so reliable, there wouldn't be just over 2 million of them. There would be tens or hundreds of millions, and no need for a regular Imperial army. He wondered how many Fenris warriors could actually survive the Astartes modifications. Under Russ's command, many elders and the strongest young men would stay behind to protect the tribe and coordinate with Imperial forces due to arrive later. A new fortress would be built on Fenris. The planet would become the recruitment world and home of the 6th Legion, supplying weapons, equipment, and fresh recruits for the Great Crusade. Axis, are you ready? Leman Russ came over and asked. Russ, I've decided. I'll offer these 3 things. Use them to persuade the Emperor, Axis said, and described the items in detail. I know them well. You used them in our fight, and you even gave me that battle suit. It's excellent, Russ replied. The suit's defensive strength had astonished him. Even his brother's fangs, capable of tearing steel, couldn't bite through the thin layer when he wore it. He treated it as inner armor. It was light, soft, and comfortable. This power-level scanner. I remember when we sparred a dozen days ago, you read my level at almost 1,800, and yours was over 500, Russ said. Among the tribal warriors, the highest level didn't exceed 20. Most were in the low teens. Ordinary women ranged 6 to 8, and children were usually below 5. Only one man, Russ himself, had a power level over 1,000, and the only other one over 100 was Axis. Scan me again, Axis said, handing the device to Russ. His Saiyan bloodline had surged after the fight with the Emperor. He'd had another breakthrough and felt stronger. Saiyans evolve through combat and continuous training. Their potential could grow without a clear upper limit. Russ fitted the device to his eye and activated it. Beep, beep, the readout flashed a string of red numbers. 756, an increase of about 200 points. Your power level is climbing fast, Russ said. How about mine? I felt stronger after our fight. Yours is over 1,860 now. I'd estimate you could break 2,000 in a year or two, Axis answered. A quick aside, in Dragon Ball lore, power levels are tied to ki and can represent planet-shattering capability. Master Roshi with 100 plus could destroy the moon, and levels in the thousands signify world or planet-scale threats. But in this setting, most people lacked ki. The scanner here measured pure physical combat power. Without ki to form and project energy, even immensely strong beings couldn't reproduce the cataclysmic feats of the original universe. Equipment also skewed readings. Power swords, chainswords, power armor, plasma, and melta weapons could make a relatively low-scoring soldier capable of killing a custodian guard if he landed a hit. The scanner gave a useful baseline, but it couldn't fully account for gear or the presence or absence of ki. "You should bring the ship, too," Russ said suddenly, stroking his chin. "I don't like this. My father is strong-willed." "Are you sure? A hyperspace ship isn't something to give lightly," Axis said. He had planned to hand over the hyperspace engine only after the custodian guard surgery was complete. "Trust my intuition, Axis. I have a bad feeling, like a premonition. If you go to my father without that ship, he won't accept your terms. You could even anger him, and the consequences would be terrible. I think I saw something." Russ crouched, voice low. In the blurry vision he described, presenting only those items would fail to persuade the Emperor and might provoke his wrath. Axis stared. A strong intuition. Could it be a psychic foresight? 7. The protection of the Wolf King, the fighting power of Astartes. Powerful psychers can foresee dangers to come, allowing them to avoid threats and steer themselves toward the most favorable future. 10,000 years later, in the 40K era, Mephiston, chief librarian of the Blood Angels, would possess such precognitive might, able to foresee attacks by chaos forces and tyrannid swarms down to precise numbers. In one of the most unbelievable battles, he even managed to summon his future self and his past self at the same time, forming a trinity to fight. With such psychic power, he could decapitate half a planet's orcs outright, a scale of destructive force far beyond even the custodes. Psychic power can enhance and transform combat in ways that ordinary martial arts or ki cannot, though its use brings enormous risk. Magnus, the foremost mortal psyker after the Emperor, who could have taken the Emperor's place on the Golden Throne, had foreseen many things before the burning of Prospero. Even before Leman Russ arrived, he had premonitions. Some of his intellect library experienced similar visions and were killed by their gene father. Leman Russ was not a psyker on Magnus's level, but he was no mere mortal either. As a subdivine soul born from the warp, he could sense things beyond ordinary men. At Prospero, he had displayed such powers. When raised by a wolf mother, his warning instincts had saved him from many crises. He had felt a prophetic warning the moment his wolf mother was killed, and again days before the Emperor's arrival. Once or twice might be coincidence, but when it kept happening, Russ took it seriously. "Russ, you saw something, didn't you? A psychic premonition?" Axis asked. "Yes," Leman Russ replied. "I saw something that surprised me. My father, our Emperor, detests deceit. This thing seems very important to him. My mind warned me while you were inside choosing items, though I can't say whether it's the same kind of psychic sensing you mentioned." He shook his head. His instincts were uneven, but persistent. From his vision, he had seen enough to decide he must protect his little cub. "If that's the case, I understand, Russ. Except for one password box, take everything else from the ship," Axis finally said, choosing to trust the Wolf Lord. Compared to the Emperor, his own wisdom seemed scant. His usual subtle manipulations might only irritate so ancient and perceptive a being. Before he transmigrated, he had been an ordinary man. The Emperor had lived for uncountable ages. In cunning and observation, he eclipsed Axis. It was better to be open and honest in front of the Emperor than to try petty tricks. "Axis, remember one thing. From now on, you are a native child of Fenris," Leman Russ said as he crouched before him. "I have ordered the tribe to keep your origins secret. Your ship was found by me in ruins. You did not arrive here by bringing it. I will be the one to claim your ownership before the Emperor. You must not speak up. Do you understand?" Russ had seen many things in that vision. He would negotiate this with the Emperor himself. Axis could not make any claims. He was still a child in this world. Axis nodded. He would obey. While they spoke, a dozen immense Imperial landing craft touched down near the tribe. These mountains of steel immediately drew every eye. No Fenris tribesman had ever seen such things. When the hatches released, a troop of space marines emerged. tall, barrel-chested warriors in heavy power armor, the twin-headed Imperial Aquila burning on their breastplates. One squad formed before Leman Russ and dropped to one knee. "Greetings, great Gene Father," the kneeling Space Marine said with restrained fervor. "I am your gene seed offspring of the 6th Legion. Welcome back." The return of their Gene Father was a momentous occasion for the Legion. His presence meant a true Lord Commander at their head again. Even if he merely stood there, his presence alone would raise their combat power immeasurably. "It is surprising to find so many sons at once," Russ said to the unfamiliar faces. "But now that I'm back, I will lead you well for all humanity." Axis pressed the combat power scanner in his eye. A soft series of beeps announced the readings. He had to know how powerful Space Marines truly were. A combat power reading of 65 registered first, more than 10 times that of an ordinary human. Average humans were around 5 on his scale. He scanned more of the 6th Legion and found most readings between 65 and 80, with the highest around 93. The numbers made sense. An unarmored Astartes could deliver just over a ton of punch force. But these raw numerical scores only told part of the story. Space Marines were not simple men in stronger bodies. They possessed 19 implanted enhanced organs that granted all-around superiority. Reaction times in the millisecond range for ordinary Astartes and down into nanoseconds for the exceptional. 2 hearts and a supplementary lung, and the Ansu membrane that allowed them to enter a form of suspended animation. Their survivability far outstripped that of other beings at a similar level. On top of their biological gifts, they wore massive power armor and wielded monomolecular blades, chainswords, power swords, bolters, meltas, and plasma weapons. Taken together, an Astartes have effective combat capability could be likened to a fighter with a power score near 200 in other systems, without the use of Kai. Axis's scanning attracted glances from the nearby Space Marines. They were curious about the beeping device in his eye. "How are my children, little wolf cub? How strong are they?" Leman Russ asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Their combat power readings are above 60 and below 100, Axis replied. "That's purely physical data. Less than 100, you're not even as good as my little wolf cub." It was already impressive for raw physical strength to reach that level, stronger than the baseline stats of some races from the Dragon Ball world. But Scions were a different matter. How strong were Scion bodies? When Nappa first arrived on Earth with a power level of 4,000, he dominated completely. He tore through planes, tanks, and warships with his bare hands and took Chiatsu's self-destruct attack without a scratch. Scions were called a warrior race for a reason. They could transform into great apes, and their power ran high from birth. At the same numerical power level, a Scion could overwhelm an opponent through sheer, abnormal physical strength. And when a Scion faced someone stronger than themselves, they still had the great ape to fall back on. Try beating them unless you're 10 times stronger. The glory of King Vegeta's era might have faded, but the racial baseline remained terrifying. "I thought these Astartes were supposed to be incredible," Leman Russ said after hearing the measurement. "Still not even 100? Russ had expected more. The Emperor had raised the Astartes to be humanity's finest, so he had assumed they would start with power levels in the hundreds. Learning they barely broke triple digits, or didn't even reach 100, was a surprise. They were stronger than the warriors of his tribe, but only by a limited margin. They still couldn't outclass Axis, that boy. Axis only rolled his eyes. "Their physical quality is at least 10 times that of ordinary humans," he said. "Ordinary humans have a baseline power level of about 5. That's for a strong adult male. When young Goku first showed up, he was only around a dozen or so. After training with Master Roshi, his Saiyan blood awakened, and he broke 100. Which warrior from our tribe would have a power level under 10? Leman Russ scoffed. "If they haven't broken 100, how can you say they're 10 times stronger than ordinary people? 10 times should put them at least over 100, maybe 100 to 200. Calling it 10 times is disappointing." Axis dealt with the remark with barely concealed impatience. "Do you even hear yourself? You're comparing Fenris's ordinary people to ordinary people on other Imperial worlds. Why don't you compare them to the Katakan jungle fighters?" The people of Fenris are generally 2 to 3 times tougher than those from the outside world, Axis explained. If ordinary humans outside have a base of 5, then by Fenris standards, their base attributes are over 12 times that of an average off-world human. They can be even higher. But they still can't beat you. That's true, Russ said with a hint of pride. They can't beat me. The Space Marines of the 6th Legion who had been standing nearby stiffened. Axis and Leman Russ's conversation had been easily overheard. The Gene Father was dismissing their power relative to a child? What on Terra was going on? Some of the Legion closed ranks, offended and bewildered. The environment on Fenris was brutal, and its people were fearsome, but to be told their combat potential didn't even match a boy of maybe 7 years old was a hard pill to swallow. Don't misunderstand, my sons of the Gene Seed, Leman Russ said with a soft smile. I'm not singling you out. I'm saying none of you match Axis. He is far superior. You're all too far below him. To Russ, that was meant as encouragement, an exhortation. Look, all of you together still can't beat Axis, so train twice as hard. To the warriors of the 6th Legion, it landed like an insult. Did the great Gene Father truly think so little of them? Was their pride so easily dismissed? The leading captain of the 6th Legion stepped forward, voice edged with dignified anger. Great Gene Father, you live on this backwater world and may not fully appreciate the situation, but we Astartes are the pride of the Lord of mankind. We are the Emperor's angels of death, his demigod warriors. We are your Gene Seed offspring. The captain was the one Axis had tested. His measured power had been 93, and he was the strongest present. He had fought in the wars to unify Holy Terra and was one of the earliest Astartes. Russ's expression softened. I'm only speaking the truth. You do not yet match Axis. He is my excellent little wolf cub. But don't worry, I will train you. I will make you stronger. Before long, every warrior in this legion will be over 100. The captain and his brothers bristled, but the offer and the promise of improvement tempered some of their offense. Russ clapped a hand on the nearest Marine's pauldron. Come aboard the ship, sons of my Gene Seed. We will take good care of this young brother. When he is made an Astartes, let us all witness his true terror together. The 6th Legion's Marines looked at Axis with newly obvious calculating interest. They wouldn't attack a 7-year-old right there and then. But this child had an extraordinary relationship with the Wolf King, and he would almost certainly undergo Astartes augmentation when the time came. When he came of age, the Legion would have their chance. They would instruct him in their ways, and they privately savored the thought of teaching the boy the old traditions of the 6th Legion. Russ laughed. If you're so eager, I can have young Axis spar with you right now. Axis's stomach dropped. Do you really have to do that, Russ? You're making me the target of their jealousy. I'm not yet 7, I'm still a child, and you want to put me in front of a pack of Astartes? Please, you old trickster, don't make me suffer what no child should. 19. The combat effectiveness of the Imperial Guard is mainly due to Horus. What an uncooperative adult. The older warriors from the 6th Legion still assumed they'd become Gene Seed offspring of Leman Russ and join the Space Marines like their Braxis snorted. You've got it wrong, he muttered. My future is with the Custodes. Leman Russ chuckled at Axis. The boy finally knew how to fear trouble. You told me you were a born warrior, Russ said. All right, I'll let you fight your fill someday. The Space Marines of the 6th Legion nodded and obeyed. They lifted Axis's small eye-shaped ship into the transport and sent it aboard. Soon other tribal warriors followed onto the transports arranged by the Emperor, while Magos of the Mechanicum began a large-scale landing on Fenris to carry out mechanized construction. Their primary task was to build a new Space Marine monastery to serve as the 6th Legion's future base, fully equipped to convert recruits into Astartes. The landing craft roared into the Fenrisian sky and climbed away from the surface. Axis, who had recently mastered Skydance, had flown before, but only a few thousand meters at most, never as high as 10,000. Now, as the transport ascended, a snow-white world filled his view. Fenris was breathtakingly beautiful. After a little more than 10 minutes, the transport reached orbit and hovered above the planet next to the Emperor's Dream, the flagship of the Lord of Mankind. It was a Glory-class battleship, but roughly 1.5 times the usual size. Dozens of battle barges, destroyers, cruisers, and frigates formed a glittering screen around it. Once aboard the Emperor's Dream, the Fenrisian warriors were lined up and taken by the Mechanicus tech priests for examination. They would be the first candidates to be transformed into space marines implanted with the gene seed of the Wolf King, Leman Russ. The tribal men and boys, unfamiliar with such machines and procedures, peered around like curious children. "Do not stare," a tech priest barked in his world-weary voice. "Come on, you're to undergo Astartes surgical augmentation. If you pass, the conversion will take 5 to 6 years." To the tech priests, Fenris seemed utterly primitive, its human technology comparable to the Dark Ages. Leman Russ stepped among the men and encouraged them. "Warriors of the tribe," he said, "do not let them belittle you. Go and undergo the transformation. I hope each of you becomes my gene seed offspring." "Roar for the Wolf King," the tribal warriors cried, thumping their chests as they filed away with the tech priests. Most of the recruits Russ had brought were under 20, some barely into puberty, so the success rate for conversion would be much higher. Russ had deliberately saved the guaranteed 100% success augmentations for the 10 adults he'd kept back. "Please follow us. The great gene seed Primarch, the Emperor, awaits," a 6th Legion Space Marine said, gesturing them forward. Leman Russ nodded, took Axis by the hand, and led him with the 6th Legion Marines into the ship's heart. They entered a vast, awe-inspiring chamber where the Lord of Mankind sat upon his throne. Flanking him stood a company of custodians, huge warriors nearly 3.2 meters tall in golden armor, each bearing a power halberd. Wherever the Emperor went, the custodes accompanied him. Axis, ever the curious child, pressed his combat power scanner against one custodes after another, wanting to measure the strength of these golden guardians. The device chirped softly, attracting the attention of the nearest custodes, but they said nothing. The boy was with the Wolf King, and the Emperor had already mentioned that the custodes would be recruiting a new member here, likely this very boy. "Combat power 1123, the scanner announced. 1168, 1112, 1113. Axis ran the device across 4 custodes in succession. Each reading was over 1,000. Each custode possessed physical strength at least 10 times that of a standard space marine. Their value was undeniable. Standing beside the Emperor was a broad, bald man of around 4 meters in height, clad in white power armor and wearing a stern yet charismatic expression. The Emperor smiled up at Leman Russ. "You have returned, Russ," he said. "Let me introduce my other son. This is Horus, Primarch of the 16 Legion, the Luna Wolves. He was the first Primarch I found." Horus, the Emperor's favorite son, the one groomed as heir, met Leman Russ with a smile, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. To Leman Russ's boisterous greeting, Horus could only roll his eyes. Could this rugged barbarian really be his brother? The thought rankled. He had been the Emperor's first discovery, long accustomed to that privileged position. Now, another son stood before the throne. Still, Horus returned the greeting with practiced courtesy. Axis stared up at the towering figure, taking him in with wide-eyed fascination. This was the Emperor's most favored son, the man who, rumor would later say, drove the Emperor to the Golden Throne. The sight of him made a strong impression on the boy. "Ha! Greetings, brother," Leman Russ bellowed. Horus's expression tightened for an instant, then smoothed into a smile. The Emperor watched them both, aware of the slight tension between his sons, but confident it would fade. Horus had never disappointed him. "Russ," the Emperor said, turning to his Primarchs, "before your return, your legions bore numerical prefixes. Now that you Primarchs are found, you may rename your legions. For example, Horus's legion shall be the Luna Wolves. What will you call yours?" Leman Russ considered for a beat and then grinned. "Father, my legion will be called the Space Wolves, after the wolves." 20. Emperor and Dragon Ball World's Black Technology. Originally, he had wanted to call them the Wolves of Fenris, a name that would honor both his homeland and himself. But he would soon be fighting among the stars, so Leman Russ reconsidered. Space Wolves suited them better. Russ noted, with a keen eye, that one of his brothers seemed to hold a grudge against him. No matter, by Fenrisian custom, they would settle it with a fight. Among the Fenrisians, brothers sparred as a friendly rite. A good battle only deepened bonds. Russ had already resolved that once he'd handled the matter of the little wolf cub, he would take this brother aside and fight properly. I understand. From this day, the 6th Legion will be officially renamed the Space Wolves, the Emperor said, nodding. The tech priests of Mars and the Imperial administrators nearest the Emperor set to drafting the edict at once. The order would be broadcast across every world of the Imperium. One of the Empire's gene seed Primarchs had returned, Leman Russ, Primarch of the 6th Legion, the Space Wolves. "Greetings to you, my father," Russ boomed. My son, I will prepare a grand feast to welcome you into the Empire's family. From now on, you will fight for humanity, for the Imperium, and for me," the Emperor replied. "Father, I found good things on Fenris. They will be useful, so I brought them," Leman Russ said, gesturing to an odd, eyeball-shaped craft parked behind him. The Emperor had noticed the strange vessel as it had been hauled into the hangar and assumed at first it was a trinket Russ prized. He had not expected the Primarch to present it as a gift. Horus, standing beside the Emperor, let a small smile curl at the corner of his mouth. The little craft looked more like an escape pod than a proper ship, not even as large as an Imperial landing barge. That his brother treated it as a treasure was further proof, Horus thought, that Russ was a barbarian, raised on a savage world. He probably had never seen Imperial battle barges. "Did you bring me a gift, Russ? What is it?" the Emperor asked, interest in his voice. "There are several things," Russ answered. "I found them all inside this small craft. A battlesuit, some weapons, a combat power detector, and, most precious of all, the little ship itself." "Oh, you think they're so valuable?" the Emperor said. "Indeed, Father. These things are extremely precious, worth far more than your flagship," Russ declared. Horus snorted. Even the custodes nearest the Emperor exchanged exasperated looks at the Primarch, who had landed from a primitive world. The space wolves that accompanied Russ muttered among themselves, embarrassed at his boastfulness. The Emperor laughed. "Is that so? My father, you may look down on them now, but I promise you, the little ship is worth more than your flagship," Russ insisted. "If what you brought truly surpasses my flagship, then I can grant you a reasonable reward," the Emperor said, smiling. Russ had been waiting for those words. He was no dull-witted savage. Beneath the rough exterior, his mind was shrewd. "You are generous, Father. I expect a reward, or perhaps more than one, because I will show you several priceless treasures. First is this combat power detector. It measures the fighting strength of any being." Russ nudged the Emperor, and the Emperor removed the eyepiece he had been wearing and handed it to the Emperor. Curious, the Emperor fitted the detector to his eye and pressed a small button on the side. The device emitted a series of chirps, and a set of numbers floated across the Emperor's vision. Readouts for Space Marines, for the custodes around him, for Leman Russ himself, and even for Horus standing nearby. "You were using this to measure my custodes?" the Emperor asked. "Exactly. I wanted to see how strong those golden-armored warriors were," Russ said bluntly. The Emperor ran more tests. He had the detector read a few psychers aboard the ship. When the psychers were idle, their readings were low, like ordinary men, each registering under 10 on the scale. The moment they tapped into the warp and channeled psychic power, the detector's values shot up. Some powerful psychers reached strengths that, if used lethally, could dispatch a dozen Space Marines. Their combat numbers climbed into the hundreds or thousands. The Emperor did not test his own power with the device. His strength, and especially his psychic might, exceeded such instruments. He judged the detector's limit at roughly 23,000. Beyond that, the small chip would overload and likely explode. "This is very practical," the Emperor said, approvingly. "This lens could be fitted into the visors of Space Marines. It detects physical strength and energy levels, though energy must be stimulated to be sensed, and it can also pick up life signatures. The Mechanicum of Mars will study this thoroughly. Once understood, it will be of great use to our legions." Russ smiled proudly. "That's just the least of it." He produced an energy pistol. "This emits concentrated energy. Who wants to try it?" he asked, looking pointedly at the custodes.